The Secrets of Middle-earth is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth, where we discuss the hidden themes and deeper layers found in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, whether in his writings or in any of the media derived from them. I'm Thomas Salerno, and joining me today are Jeff Haecker. Hey there, Jeff.
Hey, Thomas.
And Thomas Sanjurjo. Hi, Thomas.
Hey, Thomas.
And Kaitlyn Facista. Hello, Kaitlyn.
Hey.
And be sure to follow The Secrets of Middle-earth in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, or any of your podcast apps of choice. And you can also follow us on social media, where we are at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or on Twitter, where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram, where we are at StarQuest Network. And don't forget that The Secrets of Middle-earth now has an official t-shirt, which is really awesome. It's got all the races, the major races of Middle-earth on it. And it's got the Hail Mary in Quenya around the different characters. It's a really awesome design. And you can check it out. You can go to sqpn.com/merch, and you can get this really awesome design. And it's not just t-shirts. You can get this design on mugs, stickers, mouse pads, notebooks, phone cases, all kinds of crazy stuff, just by visiting sqpn.com/merch. It's a great way for you to support our show and to show your love for Tolkien and his wonderful world of Middle-earth. So at the time of this recording, there's actually a new Tolkien-inspired video game that's out, The Lord of the Rings Gollum, which is on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. It's been out for a couple of weeks at the time we're doing this discussion. When you're hearing this, it'll probably already be a month or two old. But anyway, we thought that given that Gollum is in the public consciousness again, this would be the perfect opportunity to do a character deep dive into Smeagol. Who is he? What are his motives? What are the deeper themes of his story? And why is he such a pivotal character in Tolkien's legendarium? But first, let's actually talk about the game a bit, The Lord of the Rings Gollum. I think it's safe to say, if you follow video game news at all, that you've probably seen that the new game is being roundly panned by reviewers. But I'll throw it out to the panel. Have any of you played this game or seen it played? And if so, what are your thoughts about it?
I've watched some playthroughs, and I'm so sad because I actually was going to buy this game just for this purpose, and I can't justify the cost of buying a game that I know I'm going to play just to do this podcast and then never play again. So I like stealth games. This does not look like a stealth game. I like narrative games. It doesn't really look like a narrative game. I'm not really sure what it is. And that's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of the sad part about it. Like, it's just like watching people play it. And I tried to get the most moderate viewpoint of it that I could too, because it's one of those that right now on YouTube, it's kind of being roundly panned inside of the playthroughs as well, where people are just kind of doing Mystery Science Theater 3000 takedowns of the game while they're playing it.
Oh, it's being roasted. Yeah,
That's
it's
so sad.
Yeah, I know. And like the only thing that comes to mind when I'm thinking of this game is like the pity quote that Gandalf has when he's talking to Frodo about Gollum himself. So I don't know. I'll open it up for you guys. But yeah, I was really sad just watching the playthroughs of this game.
So I think I took one for the team because I bought the game.
You are amazing.
I feel like my review has to be taken with a grain of salt because I'm not a gamer. I'm actually horrible at playing video games. I was trying to play the Gollum game, and my husband is kind of sitting there laughing at me because, like just basic video game controls I'm not very keen on. But I really like the art style. I like that it's different than the Peter Jackson movies. And I was so excited coming like, as the game was about to come out, because it looked so different and it was very refreshing and exciting. And I felt like all of their marketing was so straightforward and clear cut, which was also refreshing after kind of the ambiguity of the Rings of Power marketing. But when it really comes down to it, actually playing the game was not very fun. There were just so many glitches. And I know there was a lot of glitching coming out for the people who got review copies. So I didn't get one of those. I actually waited until the game had been out a week because I figured, maybe by then they'll have fixed the issues. But even yesterday I was playing it, and, you'll try to jump onto this spot on the wall to climb, and then it just knocks you down to the ground and you die. And my husband is also playing, and the same thing was happening to him. So that wasn't just me being bad at the game. There was just a lot of glitching. There were different levels where you'd play the entire level, get all of your little tasks done. I don't know if level is the appropriate word for it, but, a little section, you get all your tasks done and it wouldn't let you move on. And so my husband was playing and he died, and then he had to redo the whole level exactly the same, and then it worked again. So just one kind of frustrating little glitch after another. But then the story was really fun. I mean, it's fun learning about Gollum, and my husband hasn't read The Lord of the Rings. So he was telling me this morning, all of the stuff he was learning about Smeagol. And so I thought that was really cool, because I was like, how did you know that? He said something about how Smeagol had been basically, driven out of his home by his family. And I was like, how did you know that? He's like, it's in the game. So I thought that was cool. But I think it's $60. That's just massively expensive for a game that it almost feels like you're playing a mobile game, like a free mobile game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was disappointing. I think maybe if they would have spent 6 more months on it, which is crazy because it was supposed to come out last September, and then it got pushed back to this May. So I don't even want to think about what it looked like last September if it's this bad today. Yeah, I was kind of bummed out. I wouldn't really recommend people spending their hard-earned money on it.
Yeah, the reviews I've seen Oh yeah. Thank you, Kate. Because I did not buy the game, so you don't have to. Yeah, right. When I saw it was $60, even before I knew about all the problems, I was like, I don't know, because I don't know. It just, for what they were advertising, what kind of game it was, it didn't seem like a $60 game.
Right, and I think the new Zelda game is about that much, but I think that was a kind of totally different game. And a lot of people I talked to, I was kind of asking, are you going to play this game? And everyone was like, I'm too busy playing Zelda. Well, right.
Yeah,
I get that.
It came out at a really bad time where it's going to get stomped on by Zelda and the sequel to Fallen Order, and all these other big games that are coming out this summer. And the reviews I've seen seem to indicate that, lore-wise, the game does some interesting things and has some kind of cool, new characters who, fit into this kind of unknown time period. But you just, it's still, I could go on the wiki and read that, the wiki for the game. I don't need to spend $60 just to learn new lore stuff and then also be frustrated because I can't climb walls and stuff.
Right.
That sounds
if you wait long enough, someone will record all the cutscenes and put them together on YouTube, and you can just watch those and get the lore without the the frustration.
I did see that it does have a soundtrack, and it was kind of nice, enjoyable music to listen to. So you could probably find the soundtrack on a music app and enjoy that.
Oh, yeah, cool. I'll look that up. I love video games. Yeah. That's most of the music I listen to is video game and music soundtracks. So I will definitely be looking that up. But yeah, and I guess the one other thing I'd say is that I really hope that this does not bode ill for the future of Middle-earth video games, because I know that the IP is basically controlled by Embracer Group now. And I hope they just pick, I don't know, maybe more experienced studios in the future. Like, I don't know. I just hope that we get a wide variety of Middle-earth games and that they're good. Because it doesn't matter if there's a ton of them out there if they're not fun to play or, of bad quality.
I'll be honest, even with the bad reviews on this one, and if it had been $20, I would have bought it.
Exactly, yeah.
I could not justify spending $60 on this game when I just spent $60 on Breath of the Wild a couple of weeks ago. It's like, that's just, it doesn't make any sense, because I know that this is not a game that's as expansive and as going to be as much of a time investment as Breath of the Wild is. And I love narrative games. They're some of my favorite games, but they really, like, the price point for them is normally right around that $20 mark. It's like buying a good book or a movie,
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
I will say the last thing I want to say about the Gollum game is I did really enjoy how it immediately told you what year you were in and what location you were in and which characters you were speaking to, because I guess I'm slightly traumatized after the Rings of Power, having no idea what year I'm in, what characters I'm, where's Sauron, who am I talking to, who's the stranger. And so I felt like when at the beginning of the game it tells you I forget exactly what the year is, but it's like third age, this year, here's your location. And I just felt like, oh, this is so nice. Like, this is something that I had really taken for granted before the Rings of Power, with the time compression and the kind of feeling of being disoriented at the beginning. So that was one nice thing about the Gollum game that I enjoyed.
Well, yeah, hopefully, future games are able to learn from the lessons here. And even this studio, if they make another Middle-earth game, please learn from what's happened. But definitely, if anyone out there in the listening audience, if you've played the game, we want to hear from you. What did you think of it? What price point would you have preferred? What's your experience with it? Funny glitch stories. We want to know all that. So you can let us know on YouTube and Patreon and through our email and all that great stuff. But to get more into Gollum as a character rather than his various adaptations, of which we'll probably talk about the iconic one later. But I just want to throw this question out there to the panel. Gollum is I wouldn't say he's my favorite character, but he's a very interesting character. So what intrigues you guys about Smeagol?
So this is where I get to throw out my controversial opinion, right?
Yes, I was waiting. I want to hear your controversial
I want to hear that.
So my controversial opinion about Gollum is this. He is the actual hero of the Lord of the Rings. So everybody attributes it to, Frodo or to Bilbo, but the guy that gets the job done in the end is Gollum, and it's Smeagol. He is the one that completes everything. And it's interesting to me, though, this take on Gollum is very interesting to me because he's the one that had to deal with the ring the longest out of anyone, and he was corrupted by it, but not so much that he couldn't be redeemed. And there's a question of where he was before he even got the ring. So before he even encountered the ring, he was a shady figure, and then just got worse once he got the ring. But by the end, he's actually turning around. Like, the influence of Sam and of Frodo is actually making him better, and he's improving. And that's not just being away from the ring. Like, it's beyond that. He's becoming a better hobbit. And that, to me, is a huge deal. And throughout the books, you see his struggle internally. So much so that I debate the fact that at the end, when he goes to bite off Frodo's finger and steal the ring, that he's not doing that partially out of that self-loathing and need to destroy this thing that has so much debased him. So I think there's a way to take it where he's crazed. He goes and tries to steal the ring back. But the other way to think about that is that throughout the books, we've seen him struggle with himself. And this moment might be that pinnacle moment where something has just broken inside of him and he actually moves beyond that. And he's the one that gets the job done. Isildur couldn't do it. Frodo couldn't do it. This is the guy that does it. So yeah, that's my take.
That is a very controversial take.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
No, but I like hearing about that because it does make you stop and think about certain things Gollum says, you know, and certain things that he does on his journey with Frodo and Sam, especially as it gets closer to the end. Yeah. I definitely think there's an argument to be made that it can be interpreted that way. Like he's either, like you say, the hero of the story, or at the very worst, he's an anti-hero because he accomplishes the good thing, but for the wrong reasons, which would make him an anti-hero. But yeah, because I don't believe he's an out and out villain through and through. I mean, in a literary sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the theory that he got pushed in by a breath of wind from Eru Ilúvatar through Manwë. He got pushed into the fire because it was Eru's will that the ring be destroyed, and so that at the very end Eru was going to be there to finish it anyway. So to counter your argument, Thomas, I don't know
who says that it wasn't the will of Eru that this broken figure, be the one to finally go over the edge with it.
Yeah, I always saw it as Providence and like Eru in the form of Providence stepping in and kind of taking. I didn't see it as Smeagol's conscious action that brings about the destruction of the ring, but it's more for him. It's I wouldn't say accident, but I don't think he does it on purpose because I don't know. There are a couple quotes in Tolkien's letters that kind of make me think it was more the work of fate or providence that kind of brought about the ending more than his own choice.
I could be wrong. I'm vaguely remembering something where about it, and this could be just a commentary of Lord of the Rings that I've read or something I heard, but I heard it or read it somewhere that someone said that Frodo couldn't have destroyed the ring at the end because he just couldn't have because of the power of the ring and being so close to Sauron and Mordor and being in Mordor, he just could not have done it. He would not have. So I do like even though I don't know that I agree that Gollum was the hero at the end, I do like the fact that it was even Frodo, who's one of the noblest of characters in the story, still couldn't overcome this huge evil, and so it took another person, and it took Gollum to finish the job. So even if it was finished due to his own madness and addiction to the ring rather than being a hero, but either way, I have always liked the fact that that Frodo, even as good as Frodo was, like, this thing is just too powerful for him too. So there needed something else to finish it.
Yeah. I've also seen an explanation that says that it's more than just fate. It's because, like, in Middle Earth, oaths and curses work. And while they're making their way up the mountain and Gollum makes his final attack, Frodo curses him and says, "If you touch me again, you will cast yourself into the fire of doom," which is then exactly what transpires. So there's kind of the working of fate in the sense that Frodo, and he's holding the ring when he makes that oath, making it even more powerful. So it's like, it's like that final sequence on the mountain and in the Samath Naur is just so full of ways you can interpret it and different ways of exploring the different characters. But Jeff, what intrigues you specifically about Gollum as a character?
Yeah, so I can't remember if I've mentioned this on the podcast, but one of my first Tolkien memories is probably in second grade. I think our theater teacher we had a break or something, or might have been a different class or something. But anyway, the teacher was reading the riddling section from The Hobbit, and I don't think we'd really read the part up to that part or after. We just read this section, probably because it's like very interesting, dramatic, kind of like you could make do a little scene out of it if you wanted to. So that's always stuck with me as having heard the whole riddling section, and just imagining, at the time I wasn't thinking of Gollum. Like, I mean, my version of Gollum will be Gollum from the films, just because that's just what I grew up with. That'll always be what I picture when I see Gollum. But at the time, I don't know that I pictured it quite like that. But yeah, just that's always Gollum's always kind of stuck with me there. And yeah, I just kind of think of Gollum as almost like, we all kind of have a Gollum in our lives, of whether it's an actual person that is dragging us, can weigh on us, or work or anything else. But like, we all have something that's kind of, and kind of like, it's kind of like sin in a way, is that we all have this. So yes. I kind of thinking of him as a concept, in that sense that this is something that's always kind of weighing us down, and we all have that potential within us to have given to that, that darker nature. But through grace, we can overcome that. And yeah, so, and it's just interesting seeing Gollum as he really didn't have that. He really wasn't given that grace or that redemption much in the story. Like, he was, and a lot of the characters in Tolkien are redeemed, even if they're redeemed at their death. Like, but in Gollum's case, he really didn't get redemption. He just, he I guess in a way he got peace at the end, of finally not having to deal with this, horrible addiction and abuse from the ring that he suffered for centuries. So yeah, just kind of an interesting, yeah, there's a lot more to say, but yeah, that's kind of my initial thoughts on that.
What about you, Kaitlyn? Do you have a favorite aspect of this character?
Yeah. For me, I think what stands out the most about Gollum is it's just the way that he comes so close to repentance, even though he ultimately doesn't get 100% there. There's a point where he gets like 99% there. And Tolkien says in one of his letters, it's letter 96, the tragedy of Gollum, who at that moment came within a hair of repentance. So he kind of is going along with the same thing. Like, and I think that's a really big theme in Tolkien, is characters, they kind of live the bulk of their life going down this path of evil, but right before they get to this point of no return, they waver. We see that in the Silmarillion with Ar-Pharazôn, as he's, making war against the Valar. He wavers along the way. And I think we also see that with Sauron, as he's kind of at the beginning of the Second Age, as he is considering repentance, and he gets kind of far. He goes to talk to Eowyn and he humbles himself, but ultimately he makes this decision to leave and take a different path. And so I think for Gollum, that is what stands out the most to me, that he can be so wretched, and he is considered a villain by a lot of people. He does do a lot of horrible things. I think, we see in the Fellowship of the Ring that he allegedly eats babies, which is
oh yeah,
just an example. That's a good example of how bad he is. He's not just moderately bad. He's very, very bad. But it's just the fact that it's his own choices that ultimately lead him to wherever he goes. The ring does influence him, but he makes his final, I feel like I'm using the word choice a lot, but he ultimately chooses to kind of go down this very, very evil path towards the end of The Lord of the Rings on his own. And I don't think he doesn't have the ring at the time. So even though it's kind of calling to him, this is his own choice that he's making. So I feel like Gollum really emphasizes the destructive nature of the ring, but also the importance of characters' actual choices that they can make on their own.
Yeah, and Thomas, I just think it's so interesting to think of Gollum as the hero of the story that now I almost want a version of the Lord of the Rings told from his point of view, from his perspective, like kind of like that play, Wicked, which is, I believe, I haven't seen it, but from what I understand, it's told from the Wicked Witch of the West's perspective. And that idea of getting the villain or anti-hero's point of view of the same events, like through Gollum's warped sort of vision of things, like I could just imagine the same events looking completely different. And that would be just so fascinating.
That's kind of what I was hoping for with the video game. Like I was hoping for something similar to that in the game. Yeah. I don't know. It would be really interesting to see just the what's actually going through his head when he's struggling, because it's something that we only see from the perspective of the hobbits, and that's good too, though, because he's a hobbit, and I think that's the other really interesting aspect about him as a character, is that he's no different from Frodo and Sam, and that's driven home to Frodo through that whole travel into Mordor with Gollum, as he sees himself, he sees what he could become if he keeps carrying the ring. And I think that we know enough about Smeagol and about who he was before he got the ring that we know that's never what Frodo would degrade into. Even given an infinite amount of time with the ring, I don't think he would ever fall that far. But we do see the effect that it has on him, and to remember that Gollum is not fundamentally different than those hobbits in his nature, except perhaps in who he was as an individual.
Yeah, and I think what intrigues me most about his character is something you brought up, Jeff, which is him as a metaphor for the consequences of sin in our lives, and that sin as an addiction, because he keeps coming back to it. He keeps coming back to it. Like the old phrase that it's kind of gross, but the dog returns to his vomit, right? The sinner keeps returning to their sin, even as St. Paul says, I do the things that I'm not supposed to, that I don't want to do, and I do them anyway. And that's kind of like Gollum, because the Smeagol part of him doesn't want to be this horrible, has these constant debates with the Gollum side, and he kind of represents Gollum as like the shadow side of every person, which is a bit frightening.
Mm-hmm. Well, I noticed a quote from book 1 when Gandalf is talking to Frodo about the whole history with Gollum, and he says, "I think it is a sad story, and it might have happened to others, even to some hobbits that I have known." And that really emphasizes that, like, you think you're a good person, but how would you hold up to the temptation of the ring? And if you do look at it as a metaphor for sin, just the way that it can corrode your soul over such a long time, like, it really happened to anyone.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a line from, I think it's G.K. Chesterton, who says something to the effect of that, like, even the greatest sinners will be like, oh, yeah, I'm fundamentally a good person. And because they're blind to, this other side of themselves. They'll think like, well, I haven't killed anybody. I haven't robbed a bank. I'm fundamentally a good person. So many of us think and say that.
Well, and it's a slippery slope, too, because you're like, well, I haven't killed anybody. And then it's, well, I haven't killed 2 people. Well, I haven't killed 3 people. It just never stops when you're kind of continually going farther and farther.
And how Gollum starts out with just kind of like small acts of petty jealousy to murdering his cousin. Like that escalates very quickly as soon as the ring is brought in.
Well, and you almost wonder, because then I don't. We kind of before talked about his Smeagol's kind of past, but he didn't have the best upbringing. So I kind of almost wonder if that cousin, if he kind of had a beef with him already, whether from being, if he was the younger cousin being picked on or whatever, and the ring kind of just was the, that additional thing that pushed him over the edge to kind of act on that, that desire to, protect himself from being picked on. I don't know, that's just headcanon or whatever, but.
Well, I when you're talking about that too, though, you have to take a step back and remember that the ring is sentient in and of itself. So it has and it has a deeper understanding of the people around it than even they do. And so it chose Smeagol out of the two people that found her, out of the two hobbits that found it at the bottom of the river. It chose Smeagol. And so there was something about him that was already corruptible, and that the ring knew that was the path it needed to take to be able to get back to where it was trying to go.
Yeah, and in the film, when they kind of do the flashback to this, it's his cousin finds it first, and Smeagol's like, "What is that? I want it," and so it's not even that he finds it; it's his cousin. So if thinking the ring is sentient, it's like the ring, it caused it caused the one to find it, and then caused Smeagol to kill his cousin for it. So it's not a good thing. That one ring.
I feel like the ring kind of emphasizes whatever traits you already have. So like when the ring is tempting Sam, it's tempting him like, do you want to be the best gardener and have the biggest garden ever? And so when it's kind of speaking to Gollum, it's like, or to Smeagol, it's like catering to his own desires and his own behaviors already.
So this is the other thing that makes me think of Gollum as the hero, because his response to the ring is to go into hiding, right? So he flees everything that he knows, but instead of like going and seeking power with it, or going to, to live among men and start thieving from them or whatever, he drives himself to the bottom of the earth, essentially. And there's like a few different ways that you can think about that. And I'm sure it's because like he always felt an eye over his shoulder, right? There's always like something watching him. But at the same time, the response to that was to hide, to get away from it, and to hide himself away in such a way that he wasn't able to even pursue his own proclivities of theft and of violence and of, he really did abandon everything, including all of the opportunities that having the ring gave him. And that to me is such an interesting choice. Like that is a very different thing than I would have thought of a character that now has this thing that throughout the rest of the books, everyone's like either avoiding touching because it's going to cause them to want power, or seeking specifically because they want the power that it offers.
Well, I can't imagine that the ring itself would have like revealed to Smeagol that it could give him this power, because it probably wouldn't want him to try to contend with its will. But I think that I might be thinking too far into the thought of Sauron.
Well, and they say that the hobbits are less susceptible to some extent to the ring. So it's because he was using the ring. I believe he was using the ring to like spy on his family and stuff. And yeah, so to kind of gain know who's get their secrets and use it against them. But his family all kind of figured out that he was causing all these problems and drove him out. So. Yeah, I wonder if if that has something to do with it, that just being less susceptible to the power hungry nature of the ring, or the desire to attain power and conquer and whatever it's more of, and it kind of gives into the Hobbit nature of being underfoot and hiding away more so than kind of being out in the open. So it's because we see when the Hobbits take the ring, they're not like trying to lead armies and conquer. They're they're just wanting to like keep it away and go hide it away themselves. It kind of gets into that Hobbit nature of getting underground and hiding away and hiding away your valuables and whatnot.
Well, it says in the Fellowship that the ring had given him power according to his stature, so that kind of all makes sense.
Right.
I also thought it was really interesting. Gandalf says even before Smeagol had the ring, that he was interested in roots and beginnings. He dived into deep pools. He burrowed under trees and growing plants. He tunneled into green mounds, etc. And then it later says after he has the ring and after he's been shunned, he comes to the mountains and he thinks to himself, the roots of those mountains must be roots indeed. There must be great secrets buried there which have not been discovered since the beginning. So you can see even before the ring, he has this weird, like he's already a little weirdo. And he just kind of, it's almost like he becomes like a Super Saiyan version of himself, becoming an ultra weird. And instead of digging into a little hill, he's like, I'm going to dig into this big mountain to find the big secrets after I had found the small secrets. So it's like for Smeagol, finding the secrets is like, that's what he wants. And so I think that's at least part of, other than, wanting to hide away, he wants to discover the secrets.
And like, kind of doubling back on what I said before, like Sin, it ends up being just vain, because I think in that same section, it says that Gollum really didn't find any secrets under the mountain. He just found empty night, and that there was nothing there to find out, nothing worth doing except eating fish and stuff. So the ring had kind of betrayed him. It did make him think, oh, if you go into those mountains, you'll find amazing secrets. And he's just left with emptiness. Which is like, that feeling, after you've done something you're not supposed to, you're tempted because you feel it'll give you some kind of pleasure or sense of satisfaction, and you're just left with emptiness and guilt. And that's kind of like Smeagol's whole life, like he's just left with emptiness and guilt, but he keeps going back to it.
It is very sad, just like Gandalf said.
Yeah, definitely a sad character.
Pity that stayed his hand.
Right. Yeah, no. And we will definitely get to that part because, okay, at this point, Gollum has gone under the mountain and he stays there, I think, for several hundred years, right? Until
like 400 years, I think.
400 years. And apparently he was there before there was Goblin Town. Like he's in that part of the mountain, and Goblin Town kind of grows up around him. And he doesn't
he's eating
move.
the baby goblins too, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he
it says
once in a
that.
while?
He eats any of them. Yeah. Any of them that are strays. Yeah.
But he specifically goes after babies. They mention that twice, once in The Hobbit and once in The Fellowship of the Ring. Baby orcs and then baby people.
They're
So you just gotta figure this is the orc boogeyman, right? Like anything that's the boogeyman to the orcs, that's got to be terrifying. And so like there is definitely a level of like Gollum is very, very scary.
No, yeah, he's scary. The way he's described, he reminds me very much of the Morlocks from H.G. Wells's novel The Time Machine, which are also very terrifying. Like that's a novel I go back to a lot. And whenever they describe the Morlocks in their tunnels, in their caverns, and they've got these big luminous eyes and they crawl around, I'm like, I almost wonder if they were, because that novel is several decades older than The Lord of the Rings. I wonder if they were an influence on Gollum, because they're definitely as terrifying as he is. And they don't have much of a personality other than eating people, which he also does. So... So there's definitely an interesting connection there, but he's waiting there for nothing. He won't leave, but the ring leaves him. That's the interesting part. Bilbo finds it because it's not on Gollum, and he didn't drop it by accident. The ring that sentience you were talking about, Thomas, it contrives a situation that Gollum loses it. I guess hoping an orc would find it, but that's not what happens. Because the ring had no clue Bilbo would be there.
Yeah, imagine your surprise.
Yeah.
What?
And that's when Gandalf says
Another
more
hobbit?
than another hobbit. Oh, darn, like
I had a nickel for every hobbit I found in this mountain.
It'd be two nickels, but that's
two
odd that it's happened
nickels.
twice.
the ring's just rolling snake eyes at that point. And like Gandalf says, more than the will of the ring is at work. There's that providence again, that Bilbo was meant to find it out of all people on the planet. And that's just that's one of my favorite parts of the Lord of the Rings. Is that it's so subtle that a lot of people miss it, but that there's a guiding providential power at work in Middle Earth. These things just don't happen randomly.
Well, and the ring ended up doing this. The same thing happened, thousands of years before, right? Where it had gotten itself free of Isildur, and there it was at the bottom of the lake, or at the bottom of the river, waiting, and then it's found by this lowly hobbit. So, yeah, it's really interesting here too. One thing that I think it's worth mentioning, and I would love to come back, and I think we should at some point talk about the ring, just by itself.
Maybe a whole
because there's
episode.
a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. But one of the things that I'm really interested in, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, is the difference of the powers that the ring gives. And I feel like every user, I think the only two we see actually use the ring, because I don't think Sam uses it, does he? Does he ever
Puts
actually
it
put it
on.
on?
I think he does.
Does he? Okay. All right. So then those three, but they're all very closely related. This is something that I've like pondered a lot. Like, what would happen if a human put the ring on? And I don't think we have an answer to that. In the movies we do, but I don't know that it ever specifically says what power it grants to Isildur. And so, I would see it much more likely in the human version, that it just makes them immensely powerful. And the reason that it betrays Isildur is that it falls off in a moment of need, where he's in combat and it just slips off his finger, and he's expecting to have that power to be able to just wipe the floor with all the orcs that are around him, and it just falls into the river and completely betrays him at that point. So I don't particularly like the way that it's portrayed in the movies, where he disappears and then reappears, and that's kind of how he's betrayed by it. So that's something that I would love to discuss maybe at another time. But I feel like the difference of the powers between the hobbits, like the three hobbits that we see use it, all go invisible. But I wonder if that's because they know that that's what's supposed to happen, quote unquote, with the ring from each other. Whereas I don't feel like that's the same thing that happened to Smeagol. I feel like his was more like he was able to listen to conversations and hear things he wasn't supposed to hear, and know things he wasn't supposed to know. And that's sort of how I feel the power worked for him differently than the other hobbits.
I had assumed that he could just get that extra information because of his invisibility, that he was able to creep around.
It might be both, because Sam describes his hearing being intensely strengthened to the point where he can hear orcs conversing like meters and meters away. So, and his other senses are sharpened. And it's funny, Sam says he doesn't feel invisible when he puts the ring on. He actually feels like he's standing out like a sore thumb. He feels uniquely visible, which I assume is like he's at that point you're feeling the eye of Sauron kind of searching for you.
Yeah, you're being perceived.
Yeah. And he would be visible to one of the Nazgul if they were around too.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if that, and not to get too off track, I wonder if just having any of the rings of power, if you're a human, if you just essentially fade like the Nazgul and you become undead, if lengthening your life might just be something that happens with humans. And since hobbits are related to humans, it also extends their life. Like Smeagol's over 500 years old by the time he dies.
Well, I do think it's really interesting that he doesn't become a wraith. He still remains in his, physical form, but despite having had the ring for so long. Do you think that's why?
Yeah, he doesn't wear it, so it doesn't it drains him psychologically, but not necessarily and physically to an extent. But yeah, it's not like it doesn't. He's not wearing it constantly and turning into that. But he probably could have if he wore it, or anyone could.
It's like microdosing.
I would say some of it's also the will of the ring at that point, right? He's alone, and so it can't just kill him outright. It needs him alive, and so it's sustaining him because it has to keep its will going. And it's kind of like, it's kind of
so sad.
Be horrible for the ring. The ring's like, oh, this is not actually better than where I was.
This guy's the worst.
Well, that's why it leaves him, and then is picked up by Bilbo, which it did not intend, and then Bilbo unintentionally brings it straight back to Gollum, but Gollum has no idea, and that's where the riddle game starts. One of my favorite scenes, and it has an interesting history because apparently in an earlier version, in like the first edition of The Hobbit, it's way different. Like the version we're all used to is an edited version of that scene. Like, I think he might have added more riddles, but he definitely adds like those sort of hints that Gollum is also a hobbit, that like those weren't present in the.
Yeah. And I think he was reworking the idea of the ring to make it more connected to the Legendarium as a whole, because I was listening, I think, to the Prancing Pony podcast, and they were talking about this, that it wasn't really meant to be that big of a deal at the time. It was like kind of unrelated. And so as he's reworking it, as he's starting to think about the Lord of the Rings, he's kind of making things fit together a little bit better.
Well, I like the idea that it started sort of as a children's tale, right? Because that's
right.
And there's a magic ring, and the commentary that Gandalf makes about it when he first finds out, when he first like really talks with Bilbo about it, says, that there are many magic rings in the world. It's like, no, there are not. There are not many magic rings in the world. In fact, there are very few magic rings in the world. And you know exactly what you're talking about when you're looking at this thing. And that to me is intriguing. Like the further you get into the lore, you realize that these are truly unique objects. And Gandalf must have had an inkling at that point that what Bilbo had was not just another magic ring, but that it was very. I'm assuming that the first thing he must have thought was that it must be one of the dwarvish rings that was lost, because that would make the most sense. But I don't know, like you wonder then how long it did take him to like go and hunt this down and figure out that nope, this is actually like, I think so much of it was probably him not wanting it to be true, right?
Yes, yeah. Because then
sure.
then Sauron's returned, and he doesn't want to have to deal with that. Or rather, yeah, like you said, he doesn't want it to be true. I like the kind of in-universe explanation that Tolkien throws out, that the reason why there's two versions of the riddle game story is that Bilbo wrote the version that's in the first edition of The Hobbit to cover up how he really got the ring, because it's already working on him, and he wants to get rid. Gollum called him a thief, and he doesn't want to be associated with that, so he tries to put his claim to the ring in black and white. I deserved it. I won. And then he even says at the Council of Elrond, most of you here have heard me tell this story differently. And I feel like that's Gandalf, not Gandalf. That's Tolkien cluing his readers in. Some of you may have read this tale differently, but here's the true version. It's like that. Yeah, it's a retcon. Before that word was even in the geek lexicon, Tolkien is retconning his earlier story, but giving an in-universe explanation.
The father of all fantasy is also the father of all retcons. There you go.
He's so clever about it, too, that it makes it just even more enjoyable.
Well, we can say Frodo's a more reliable narrator than Bilbo was, because Frodo's the one who wrote the Lord of the Rings, so he's probably giving a more honest opinion of of everything. And
I think the most important part, like you've got it in the notes, Thomas, but I think the most important part of the whole encounter is that Bilbo spares Gollum's life. And
yeah,
there's absolutely no reason to. Like, there's no reason to at this point. He's just escaped the orcs that they've been fighting for their lives with. And I know that The Hobbit's a lot more of a mild book than The Lord of the Rings, so there's a lot less actual murder and death. But you know, at this point, he would be justified in defending himself when he finally gets to the point where he angers Gollum enough for Gollum to chase him through the caves, and he knows what this creature is capable of. But he does spare him. Like, he has the opportunity to kill him and to put an end to this. I think he knows that it's evil, but he doesn't. And then, you know, we see the effects of that throughout the rest of the story, and it's amazing.
And that's almost like not only is providence at work, but free will.
Mm-hmm.
That Eru is willing to leave certain things up to the free will of his creatures. He puts Bilbo in that situation, but Bilbo makes the choice, the final choice. And so it's almost like it's cooperating in grace. It's cooperating in the will of Eru. That, you know, Eru can put all kinds of things in motion, but if, you know, the people of Middle Earth are not automatons like what Aule tried to make with the dwarves that are just tied to his will initially. You know, they're the free peoples of Middle Earth. They have free will. And that's, I think that besides providence, free will is one of the great themes of the Legendarium. So I think that Tolkien wanted to put it front and center in why things end up working out the way they do at the end of The Lord of the Rings.
And then you can say that even that Frodo kind of learned that mercy from Bilbo, from that story. So Frodo, the same thing, Frodo had the chance to, when Gollum attacked them, him and Sam, when they're on the quest, they could have, you know, and even before that, when Gandalf first mentions that Gollum's following them, Frodo's like, why didn't Bilbo just kill him? And Gandalf's like, well, he might still have a part to play, but, you know, it's pity that stayed his hand. So kind of Frodo's learning that lesson, having that lesson passed on to him, which ultimately, if it wasn't for Gollum, and they couldn't have gotten to Mount Doom to even be where they could throw the ring in. So
right, because he leads them to this more accessible path into Mordor, which they were just going to go up and knock on the front door, and I don't know how they thought that was. I don't know how they thought going to the Black Gate was going to work
simply
out.
Walk into Mordor.
I feel so bad for them because they lost. You know, I don't think Frodo was at all expecting to lose Gandalf, and then after that, he doesn't have Aragorn with him, and he's just like, I don't know what to do. So I think, you know, Smeagol coming onto the scene in the Two Towers is also kind of another providential collision of the two characters.
That's right, because he's been following them this entire time, because, you know, and you mentioned, Thomas, like, when did Gandalf start to begin to suspect? I think it might be when he interviews Gollum, or rather interrogates him, because Aragorn captures him, and, you know, Gandalf, as he says, puts the fear of fire into him and gets him to talk, and learns from him things about the ring that I think clued him in. Okay, this is not one of the lesser rings. It's not one of the other great rings of power. Oh, no.
It's like, I better go check the archives.
Check the archives right away, yeah. And he actually had to look through the archives. He did not have the magical archive guy from the Rings of Power who can immediately find...
Here's the one piece of paper you need.
Yeah. I love that guy. That guy is faster than, like, Google. It's amazing. But no, Gandalf is finally able to figure this stuff out. But they leave Gollum in prison, hoping that they can rehabilitate him. But and that's why I hoped that this game had been successful, because it's an interesting part of that story where somehow Sauron, through his agents, is still kind of in communication with Gollum, because Gollum had gone to Mordor, been captured, spilled the beans to Sauron that the ring is abroad and that a hobbit named Baggins has it. And now when he's in prison, Legolas says that somehow he's conspired with Sauron's people in the outside to effect his escape. That's really interesting. Who has he been talking to? Does Sauron have a spy among the Mirkwood elves? We're never told, but that's a very interesting possibility.
See, that would have been a really cool TV show to make.
Yeah.
Just saying. Just saying.
The Gollum TV show.
Gollum, the TV show without glitches.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, it would be really cool to see essentially a dark elf in earnest, right? That's not bent on this destruction or, like, you know, commanding the orcs or anything like, but really just being subversive and inside of the elvish community.
Yeah.
But, you know, destroying things subtly from the inside.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like political intrigue kind of.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that would have been really cool. Cool thing to make a show about.
There you go.
But
there you go, Amazon.
Yeah. Take it.
Come on, Amazon. Let's, you know, when you're finished with, oh, come on. You can juggle more than one show.
When we're done with the second age, let's just hop on to this idea.
Exactly. Yeah. But Gollum, you've got to be impressed with how far he travels, by the way. He is all over the place. You know, they say he goes to Erebor, he tracks Bilbo there. When he escapes from Mirkwood, somehow he gets into Moria and starts tracking them from there, which lead to some of the creepiest scenes in the Fellowship of the Ring, where they describe just seeing his eyes and nothing else. Like that's where he's really started to remind me of the Morlocks. Those are just where you see just his glowing eyes, and you don't even know what it is, but he's there, you know. And I love that Aragorn knows before anybody else. You know, Frodo tells him,
of course he does.
Yeah, because of course he does. And he's even awesome. Said he's tried to catch him. Yeah.
Just imagine. That would be a funny sight to see.
No, yeah, I love one of my favorite lines in terms of funny lines in the Fellowship is when Aragorn describes the road back to Mirkwood with Gollum in tow. And he says, I was glad to be rid of his company, for he stank. Yep. For my part, I hope never to look upon him again. But Gandalf came and endured long speech with him.
He's like, I could not be around this guy for a second longer.
And it's Aragorn saying it. So, man, he's got a lot of patience. He puts up with a lot. So that's a big deal.
And Aragorn probably didn't smell very good either. Right? So you can imagine how much worse Gollum would smell.
Well, he said he was covered in green slime when he found him. So, like, rotting algae, I'm sure, does not smell very good. But of course, you know, Gollum finally, when the Fellowship is scattered, he's able to find Frodo and Sam. Or rather, almost Frodo and Sam kind of find him. They lay a trap for him. And they're able to get his promise made not on the precious, but by the precious, that he will. Well, wait, what exactly does he promise? By the way, I'm not. He doesn't promise to help them, really.
To the books,
right?
Yeah, he promises not to let the Dark Lord have the ring again. I think, which he does do, but he didn't promise. He didn't say anything about promising not to try and steal it back. Because he does that on several occasions. In fact, he even says that one time when he's arguing with himself. He's like, you know, he promises not to hurt Frodo. So he's like, oh, so I won't hurt him. I'll let Shelob hurt him. Then I get the ring for myself. And I'm like, wow, okay. I'm like, you've really got to make a promise with this guy, you've really got to be really specific, because he will find any way to try and worm out of his agreement with you.
Be a good lawyer.
Yes. He's going to get off on
That's
a technicality.
A show, Amazon. There you go.
That's a show, yeah.
But the really
Gollum,
interesting thing
attorney at
there
law.
is that the really interesting thing there is that he's truthful.
Mm-hmm.
He's specifically truthful, but
Mhm.
he's not lying, you know, and he's not just going to out and out lie. And when he commits to these promises, he commits to them. Like he's not going to harm them. Not that he's not going to lead them to harm, but he is not going to harm them himself. And he could very well, but he doesn't.
Well, he has the opportunity to several times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You can see that he's continually struggling against his own self throughout this entire story. And I thought this was one really interesting detail. Tolkien describes him as having a green glint in his eyes whenever he's being more evil. And then his eyes kind of go back to more gray when it's almost like Gollum is the green eyes and then Smeagol is the gray eyes. And when he gets towards the end of his journey, after I feel he's kind of past the point of no return, Tolkien writes that the green glint flickers under his heavy lids and it did not leave his eyes after that. So it's like at that point is like Gollum won. And so I thought that was kind of interesting, like the green and gray kind of, whenever he kind of mentions those colors throughout, it's like you got to pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And green is kind of that classic evil color, like in a lot of like literature and stuff. And even since then, like green is kind of is kind of associated with the bad guys. So like green is the color of envy, and then you see that in fantasy since then with like in Harry Potter that Slytherins are green.
Yeah.
Not that all Slytherins are
yeah.
evil, but
Well, and I thought about that when you said he was covered in green slime. It made me think of the green glint in his eyes.
Oh yeah. And in the books, it clues you in as to who's speaking, Smeagol or Gollum. Because in the movie, Andy Serkis's amazing performance clues you in as to who's talking, because the two personalities have very different mannerisms. And it makes me feel even more sad for him when you see how emotionally abusive the Gollum personality is to Smeagol. He's manipulative, he's cruel, and he knows exactly what Smeagol's buttons he needs to push to get Smeagol to do what he wants. And it's just so it's a tragic thing to watch unfold, especially after they've been caught by Faramir. And in the movies version of it, well, Frodo's able to get his life spared, but in the movies version of it, the Gollum side is being really manipulative. It's like almost like it's trying to comfort Gollum, like, it's okay, I told you he would betray you, that's why you should come back to me and do what I say. And that scene is always so unsettling and sad.
It is.
That gaslighting, right? It's like
yes, yeah.
But it's Sauron, like in a nutshell. It's the ring that has worn off on him, and that to me is like, I love that. I love the way that it's corrupted this part of him, so much so that it is fully embracing the darkness.
Right, and so much so that he embraces the darkness in a way that, like, he doesn't serve Sauron, really. He doesn't want Sauron to get the ring. He's deathly afraid of Sauron. But he kind of serves Shelob. It says in the books he worships Shelob. And I don't know if that's feigned just to save his life, or if there's something in Shelob that he recognizes that the two of them are alike in a certain way. What do you guys think of that? I just thought of that as we were discussing this.
It's almost like they have a working relationship. Whereas like with Sauron has been really mean to him by tormenting him. But with Shelob, it's like his whole plan with the hobbits is like, I'm going to send her a little treat. And then in return, she'll leave the clothes with the ring behind. So it's like, I'm going to give her something and she's going to give something back to me. So it's almost like maybe they've kind of, maybe he's done something similar in the past with her.
Right. Yeah. They definitely say he's interacted with her more than once. But I think they have that kind of gluttonous desire in common for different things. Mm-hmm. You know, for Shelob, she just needs to eat people and have that glut of life, like it says in the books. And Gollum, of course, lusts for the ring itself, and that's all he wants or cares about. And he knows that Shelob doesn't care about it, despite what you may have seen in some other video games. Shelob does not care about rings or armies or ruling the world or any of that stuff. She just wants to sit in her lair and eat people. But I think he might recognize that connection, that they're both lustful, gluttonous creatures that want something more than anything. And I think maybe that's why they understand one another in a weird way.
But they also want to be left alone, right? Like they don't really want to have to deal with all the other junk. Like they want power. They just I want my thing, and then I want all you people to just go away. And
right.
Well, I wonder if the ring gives him, even if he doesn't wear it, because we see Bilbo can understand the spider speech when he's wearing the ring. So I wonder if like the ring gives him some kind of like way to communicate with Shelob. Like even if it's maybe not quite as directly as speaking one another, but maybe there's kind of some rudimentary communication there. And
well, I hadn't thought of that.
Seems
but
like
that's
they have an understanding of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's kind of funny to think if Shelob could have said, I'm your god or something to him, and he could have, he could have believed it. And so that's where that could have come from.
Yeah, he kind of does. It says he bows down before her and grovels on the ground, and you're just like, ugh. He has the worst luck with like meeting people.
Yeah, poor Gollum.
We could talk about Gollum for hours and hours because he's such a complex character, such an interesting character. Like, I almost forgot. Do you guys have any favorite Gollum quotes? Because he's so quotable. And I will not ask any of you to do the voice. If you want to, fine. That would be great. But if you have any favorite Gollum quotes, throw them out there because he has so many good lines.
All right, so I use the "it burns, it freezes" all the time. It's like one of my favorites. So if anything's too tight, I'm like, it burns, it freezes. Just can't, I that's my absolute favorite. I always use that quote. My kids know it, and they're like, it wasn't until we got to that point in the books, they're like, oh, that's where it comes from. I'm like, yeah, there you go. Congratulations.
I don't know. For me, so I'll throw out for me, it's the taters scene from the Two Towers.
Yes.
And the version of the film is just amazing. But he says, "What's taters, precious? What's taters?" And then there's Sam's whole scene of potatoes, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew, and I love that whole scene. But I mean, similar to my family, like whenever we have potatoes with dinner or something, we tell the kids, "Okay, we're having taters." Sometimes they'll even say like, "What taters?" or something like that. So it's almost like they're quoting Gollum to me. So, but yeah, I love that scene in the book and in the film. But
so I love this part in the book. So Sam says, "I dare say, but where have you been sneaking off and sneaking back, you old villain?" And then Gollum is like, sneaking, hobbits always so polite. Yes, oh, nice hobbits. Smeagol brings them up secret ways that nobody else could find. Then he goes on and on later on, and then Sam's kind of like, "Oh, sorry. Okay, well, where have you been?" And then he just goes, "Sneaking." Like I love that, and they did such a good job of that in the movies too. They perfectly nailed that moment. Like I love, like he's so, even though he's like so evil, he's also still so silly.
No,
so mischievous.
My brother and I are constantly quoting Gollum lines, like, and even one that's original to the movie. Like, if someone spills like food or crumbs on themselves, we'll be like, "Crumbs on his jacket, sis. He took it," you know, like, or you know, when our cat like stares at us with my cat, to try and get human attention, will just bug his eyes out and stare at you, and we'll look at him and go, "Terrible elves with bright eyes," and stuff like that. Like I don't know, like I guess these little things have just been burned into our brains, and he's such a funny character. I get one of my favorite ones is not like a quote, but it's like a little moment in The Two Towers, the book, when after they leave the Black Gate and they're going through Ithilien, Tolkien is at great pains to describe how beautiful the foliage is. And he names like 36 different kinds of like trees and as many different kinds of flowers. And he describes how great they smell. And the hobbits he describes them walking along, like taking deep breaths and going like, "Ah," and then behind them, Gollum's coughing and retching because he can't stand the smell of the pretty flowers. And I chuckle every time I come to that point in the book, because I imagine that in my head. It was almost like you could do like a quick cut, if it were filmed that way, from them, like the hobbits rejoicing in this smell, to Gollum just going like,
yeah.
It's like an allergy medicine commercial. Like the Hobbits.
Yeah.
The Hobbits.
Don't forget your Benadryl, Gollum.
Yeah.
You too can enjoy the fresh, clean scent of flowers.
Who knew that's what he wanted the One Ring for? There you go.
Yeah.
Well, hey, it might be because the One Ring increased all his other senses. Maybe now, like, it's increased his sense of smell to where, like, any kind of smell is painful.
Well, aside from his own, because I can't imagine like we said, he can't smell very good, so just got used to that.
Oh, and that reminds me of one last one where they feed him the lembas, and he starts coughing, and he goes, "You tries to choke us." He accuses them of trying to kill him deliberately.
He is very funny.
Yeah.
And if you think about the limbus as almost like a metaphor, for the Eucharist, it's like he can't consume the Eucharist, like it is choking him. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think even Frodo says, like, you're not ready for it. You can't even try it.
Yeah, very sad. Just kind of, I don't know, every little detail about Gollum just emphasizes its sadness. Even though he's very funny when he speaks.
Right, yeah. That's the thing. It's almost like a bittersweetness. Like, yeah, some of the things he does are really funny, but in kind of a pathetic way where you feel sorry for him. You guys have any other closing thoughts on this character before we wrap up?
I still say he's the hero. That's it. I'm going out on that note.
Argue, yeah. No, I am not going to argue. I think that is a very interesting, and I still want my like version of the story from Gollum's point of view. That would be very interesting. In his voice too, although that could get obnoxious at like the length of a whole book, I could imagine.
Like, "Dear Diary, I'm following the hobbits around again today."
And then just wait till Andy Serkis narrates the whole thing in Gollum voice.
That would be crazy.
Okay, so that would be great though.
Worth it.
But that 100%. Yeah, worth it. That's another thing that the Gollum character has given us. Andy Serkis's performance and all his great narrations of the audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
And he's now doing the Silmarillion too.
Yeah, I think it's coming out this month, so it might be out before this episode.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought I think it had been announced a while ago, or at least widely speculated, but yeah. Recently I saw that it was like officially coming out, so.
Super exciting. I cannot wait to hear his voices for the different elves.
Like, does he sing in the Einolindale? Like,
that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm excited. I'm super excited.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited for anything Middle Earth that he's doing. And that's another thing about like his performance of that character changed the way CGI characters are done, because it brought the whole motion capture technology to a mature state where they're like, we could do a whole character this way, you know, because I don't think it would have worked practically with makeup with Gollum, because he has to look emaciated, and that's hard to do, you know, practically. You know, they're great at making people look fat with practical effects, but making them look starved doesn't really seem to work out. So
yeah, it's a bit cruel to do that to someone for a
unless
role.
you're like Christian Bale or one of those method actors that.
yeah, I was gonna say some crazy method actor might like, I'm going to starve myself for 3 months for this role.
I don't think we want that.
No. Gollum might, though. On that note, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make this show possible, including Tim W., Marion M., George U., Amy M., and Robert H. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give help us to continue to create the Secrets of Middle-earth and all of the shows here at StarQuest, and you can join them at sqpn.com/give. And don't forget that another great way to support the show is by getting your official Secrets of Middle-earth gear at sqpn.com/merch. And we'd love to hear from you. Is Gollum your favorite Tolkien character? I'm sure he's somebody's favorite. If so, why? And what are some of your favorite Gollum quotes and moments? Have you played the Gollum video game? And if so, what did you think of it? You can let us know all these things at sqpn.com/Middle-earth, or on our Facebook page, or on Twitter, or by sending an email to middleearth@sqpn.com, or by commenting on our YouTube channel or on the StarQuest Discord server over at sqpn.com/Discord. And we'll be back next time where, as kind of a follow-up to our Father's Day episode, we will be talking about the Middle-earth fan film Born of Hope, which is about Aragorn's father, Arathorn. And you can watch the movie for yourself at bornofhope.com. Until then, Kaitlyn Facista, thank you for sharing with me the secrets of Middle-earth.
Thank you.
And Thomas Sanjurjo, thank you as well.
It's been a pleasure.
And Jeff Haecker, thank you also.
Thank you, Thomas.
Once again, I'm Thomas Salerno, and thank you for listening to the Secrets of Middle-earth here on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Find the show wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/mysterious.